Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the show. Glad to have you guys here on this Wednesday, the 8th of November, 2023. Thank you for tuning in. Listen, you guys, say a guy was out there and say he went and he found a used truck, but say it was in great shape and he got it for a good price. And it was white. It's beautiful, it didn't have hardly any, it had a few little scratches, maybe one little dent on the door, but it's only small, and he got it for a good price, and he's really happy with it. He thought, hey, this is great. I got this truck, and it's a really nice truck, and he's proud of it. He waxed it and washed it and everything that weekend. He had it parked in his driveway. Say some teenagers came along, and they took his truck, and they went out and had a field day with it. They drove about 10 miles away, and they went through the swamps. And they were riding over giant bumps and rocks and mud. Bang! The whole truck would fly up into the air and land on top of a big lump of mud or whatever and get stuck in the mud and everything else, and spinning wheels, and they were having fun with it all weekend. His truck, his beautiful truck. And the police were out hunting for it. So yeah, the police found the truck. All covered in mud. The undercarriage had dents in it. And they told the guy, he said, "This is your truck, come out." So he come out and he takes a look at the truck, and it's all covered with mud and it's a mess. But the first thing he does is he hops behind the wheel and he starts it up, and it starts. And then he starts driving it, and yeah, it still drives. Still runs. It still does work. And he's thinking to himself, well, yeah, maybe I can clean it off and stuff. Maybe I can get it back. But they made a mess of it when they had it. Well, that white truck is what's happened to our justice system now at this point. They're mucking it all up. Now, if those teenagers had continued, they would have totally ruined that truck. One time through the mud's bad enough, and over the big lumps and humps. But if they continued to do that, in the end, it would look like what they have in North Korea. Well, I mean the justice system in North Korea. So it's one thing to cover it with mud, but you can still wash it off. That's what I'm saying. There's still a white truck underneath there, and with a little bit of tender love and care, maybe you can get it back somewhat. Wash all the mud. Anyway, I'm moving on because I'm rambling a little bit here. I want to get in there and take a look at what's happening in the news right now. Zelensky rules out holding elections next spring. Calls for unity in fighting Russia. Now this goes to show you a little something, doesn't it? No elections next spring. In wartime, countries can often postpone elections off. They can just push it off into the future. That can happen in wartime. That's all I'm saying, to point that out. Another thing I wanted to point out about this war, well, let's take a look at this article here. The G7 is united on Ukraine as Russia warns over Western aggression. So, the G7 hopes to assure Ukraine of support amid the Gaza war, as Russia says Western policies endanger the world. What does he mean by that? Endangers the world. These Western policies. What does Russia mean when they say that? What they mean is they got 6,000 nuclear weapons. That's what they mean. And that's what would endanger the world, is that all of those ICBMs and nuclear MERVs and all that. And they just did a ballistic test a few days ago. That's what they mean by endangers the world. It means don't push our buttons too hard. But here's the thing about Ukraine that I wanted to say. Do not be surprised if in the next couple months, more or less, that this Ukraine war could just all of a sudden end. Do not be surprised, guys. Because we're coming to an inflection point in this war. It's been going on for years now, like a stalemate. We're coming to an inflection point. And it's during these inflection points one of two things can happen. And both equally likely. One is a sudden cessation of the war, an ending of the war in Ukraine. That's one of the things that could happen. And it's quite a high likelihood. Don't dismiss it. And it could happen pretty soon, within the next few months. Or the alternative to that is another thing that's just as likely to happen is this war could expand into Eastern Europe and become World War III. So we're at that inflection point right now where it could go either way. It could go either way, honest to goodness, guys. Anyway, let's take a look at this. Thousands of civilians flee North Gaza as Israeli troops and Hamas fighters clash. I heard that they're fleeing on foot, and here's a picture right here. Look. It looks like they're on foot. Thousands of them just, I guess they're just walking out and leaving their houses and their belongings and everything else. Where are they going to stay in southern Gaza? What are they going to do there? It's war-torn too. You know, anyway. Look. Honest to goodness, war is horrible. I am really hoping that the Ukraine war will end in the next couple months. And I think the likelihood's quite high that it could. And it could end suddenly when it does end. It could take people by surprise. So, I'm not saying that definitely, don't get your hopes up and saying, oh, Glenn says the war is going to end. No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that there's an equal likelihood that it could go either way here. Heaven forbid it goes the other way. And, you know, I wanna, there's unsung heroes here. The farmers in Ukraine provide tremendous amount of food to the world's hungry people. The wheat farmers and stuff in Ukraine. You know, and I consider them to be unsung heroes. And it would be nice if this war ends so they could get back to farming without having bombs drop around them. Because that's a right that they deserve. Because of the goodness that they provide for the earth. And feeding all of these hungry people. I mean, when you've probably in your life, you've probably at some point or another, or many times in your life, ate food that actually was produced on those fields. It's wonderful. The fields in Ukraine are a wonderful growing agricultural area. Okay. That being said, Netanyahu has rejected Biden's phone request for a 3-day pause in Gaza war. IDF, which is the military arm of Israel, they're tightening the noose on Gaza right now. Now, one other thing I wanted to talk about before we get into the financial markets is people out there are witnessing an evolution, a real evolution. You know, your evolution that the evolutionists believe in, they've never found any. It's why it's still called the theory of evolution. Even though Darwin proposed this theory such a long time ago, they've never found any conclusive evidence of the reality of it, of the theory. They've never verified it. To this day, they've never proved it to be absolutely true. They don't have the evidence to back it. But here, we got an evolution happening where the evidence is verifiable. Right in front of your eyes, right in front of your face, but nobody can see it. So what is this evolution? It's the evolution in computers and their ability to fool your brain into thinking that you're in a reality. What they're doing here is they're actually creating realities. And right now, these realities are only video games. But you have to understand that about maybe 30, 40 years ago, all we had was a game called Pong, where two little white paddles were moving back and forth on a screen. Now the games are moving into more and more realism, and each time they bring out a new version of the games, these games are becoming more and more realistic, these realities within computers. And this is an evolution. Now, what will this evolution do when sentient artificial intelligence takes control and starts to program these games? As you're playing the game could be programming itself or reprogramming itself. So it's never the same game twice. That's what's coming next. And the next thing that's coming too is, instead of an interface with the game on a two-dimensional television screen using a controller that's in your hands, the next evolution is that it's going to be directly interfaced with your brain, so that you open your eyes and you're inside the game world. And each time they invent a new one of these games of realism, this evolution is moving very fast. The realism increases exponentially each time these games are come out with these new graphics engines that they have. This is why an awful lot of these younger people are really interested in what's called graphics cards, which is a something that they like to buy that gives them a graphics engine on their computer to run these games. It requires more and more power, more and more computing power all the time. Moore's law is in place here. Take a look behind my head, some of the graphics from this newest Grand Theft Auto game. The realism is, you can see every single blade of grass, the textures on the concrete, the people in the games. It's all starting to look very, very real, even though it's still two-dimensional. Can you imagine if you could actually enter into this game world, your consciousness, by what you could get fooled into thinking you're in the real world. If you stayed in there too long, you go to sleep at night inside the game world. I know some of this sounds bizarre to you, but once they get it so that it's not a two-dimensional interface, once they get it so that it's actually inside your brain and you're inside the game, and this is coming next, and it's coming soon, you could go to sleep inside the game world and wake up and you could forget the real reality here and start being, that's a word I could use, when you are absorbed in something or something absorbs you. To the point where you lose real reality, or what you could refer to as this real world here as base reality, and you're inside a simulated reality and don't even know you're inside a simulated reality because you lose memory of the real reality. So you have, what you basically they're doing is they're creating another dimension, basically. So, and this evolution's occurring right in front of all of us, and we don't even see it. So, I mean, question mark. How do you know you're in base reality right now? Okay, enough of that science fiction talk. Let's move on and let's take a look at the silver price today. And silver's going up. It's up 11 cents at 22.73. They just got through doing a thing where they tried to suppress the price, and I don't even think they're going to get down to the 21s any longer. The best they can do is get it down maybe 22.50, 22.25, something like that, and then it bounces back up to 23, 24. It's getting ready for this. It's on the springboard right now, getting ready to go. It's just a matter of time for this before the train leaves the station, guys, I think. think we're getting really close now. I'm starting to get that feeling inside. We're getting really, really, really close. I think you only got a limited oil prices too. Right now, these $70 per barrel oil prices, enjoy them while they last. I don't think they're going to last long either before the oil price goes up. I think we're on the verge of I tell you honestly what I think. To change the subject just a little bit, honestly, what I think is I think if the war starts, if the war widens in around Israel and the Persian Gulf region, not only will oil prices explode, I think that will be the Ukraine war will be more likely to end if that happens than the Ukraine war expanding. In other words, if this war holds off and this whole thing peters out in the Persian Gulf region, say Israel does whatever they're going to do and then they end the war and they cease hostilities more or less, say that happens, then the war in Ukraine is much more likely to take off and go big and go nuclear, I think. And I think vice versa. You know, I think that this part of these anyway, let's move on. Let's talk about cryptocurrencies now for a second. Here they go, 35,223. So Bitcoin is starting to increase again a little bit because it was in the 34s yesterday, and Ethereum is at 1890 and looking good, and XRP is looking good at 68.4 cents. And so our coins are starting to move up again a little bit. This could take all the cards. This could take the fiat currencies are in trouble. When the fiat currencies really start to die, and they have a life cycle, you know, I mean, man, I'm telling you, the dollar is very long in the tooth. So if the dollar dies, they're going to have to go into something to have for trade, commerce. You always have to have something that's mankind. For thousands of years they use gold and silver. This is new. This is putting itself in the position of gold and silver. Here's what I think would happen. I think that if the fiat currencies suddenly have a massive, let's call it, they go into hyperinflation, and they start to not function properly and stuff, I think the first knee-jerk reaction of everybody out there is going to be to run into gold and silver. But you got to understand that there's not enough silver to go around for everybody. If everybody on Earth just wanted 1 ounce of silver, well, that's 8 billion ounces. There's no way we can cover that. It would take them 15 years to dig that much out of the ground just to give everybody on Earth 1 ounce. And what about gold? Gold's an equally small market. So what's going to happen if they all run for gold and silver to try to get out of the fiat currencies? Well, it's all just going to disappear. And then you're not going to be able to buy the physical. And they don't want paper short contract. That isn't not real. They don't want that. That's an IOU. They don't want an IOU. They want the real thing. And so if you can't buy the real thing, if it's all gone, especially silver, you can't buy it. And then they got all these trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars floating around out there. Still, because even after they've bought up all of the gold and silver, there's still going to be the vast majority of the money still ain't going to have a home. And they're going to be desperate because the value of that stuff is going to be going down like a stone, sinking in the water. And they're going to be absolute desperation to get into something, anything, to save their souls. They're like a bunch of rats swimming in the water. If they see a boat, they're going to try to climb on it. Here's your boat, right here. for all those trillions. This could be the boat. This could end up being the boat. I'm not going to deny that fact. And because there's so many trillions out there, gold and silver can't cover it all, but this stuff can. And so if that happens, and I mean it's only a small likelihood of it happening. But then again, when you buy a lottery ticket, there's a much smaller probability of it happening, but you still buy the lottery ticket because you want the chance at that small probability. Yeah, I won the lottery, $100 million, I'm rich. This is the same thing. You don't need, if this does what I just said, and all those trillions go into it, you don't need to have a lot of Bitcoin. You don't need a whole Bitcoin. No, if that happens, and I'm going to tell you guys something else about this. That's either going to happen or this stuff's going to go away eventually. Because that's what a lot of the people that bought this stuff are waiting for, and that's why they hold it. That's why they're HODLing it. Well, if they stop HODLing it, what happens to the price of this stuff? If it happens, you don't need a lot. That's all I'm saying, guys, is maybe only even 1% of a Bitcoin, of one Bitcoin. If that happens. And if it goes up to these unimaginable, well, you can't really price it in dollars if dollars hyperinflating, but the purchasing power of a Bitcoin could go astronomical if that happens. Because just like you think there's not enough silver to go around to share with everybody, I'm going to tell you what, each Bitcoin breaks into 99 million Satoshis. And there's not enough Satoshis to go around. They'll have to keep breaking the Satoshis down to smaller numbers if the whole world adopts this stuff. World adoption of Bitcoin, what would the world look like? But then again, this Bitcoin's only holding this amazingly high price that it is right now, $35,000, because there's a giant flaw in all of the fiat currencies. Dow Jones Industrial Average 34,128. It's down 24 points on the day so far. Oil, look at that price, 75.87. It's down $1.50. Wow, that's cheap right now, considering what the dollar's worth. This is like $15 oil. If it was like being priced like a few years ago when the dollar, in comparison, and the silver price is as low as it's ever been right now too. I mean, in comparison to what your dollar can purchase, comparatively speaking. Bonds and rates today, we're looking at falling yields today. We're looking at 10-year 4.52. Actually, it's 4.53, and it's fell 4.2 basis points. And the U.S. 30-year has fell 6.5 basis points, and it sits at 4.67. And the dollar index today is dropping right now. It's at 105.47. Well, guys, I'm going to go and have some dessert. I sliced myself up some apples and I boiled them up. And I've left them to cool. I'm going to put a little bit of cottage cheese on top of that, and maybe sprinkle a little bit of cinnamon on it. And that's going to be my dessert for after dinner. Thank you guys for listening. You guys have a great afternoon, and we'll catch you guys in the next show. Bye-bye.